Byron, the line's backing up.
Let it back up. Nobody leaves this building without their name on something. Last one for you today.
I don't need this. You should keep it. Give it to somebody who actually wants it.
You do want it. You're just not sure you're allowed to.
That's not the same thing as being hungry.
No. It isn't. Take it anyway.
Pot roast. Foil, not a lid. Lids sweat.
You didn't have to do this.
I know. That's why I did it.
What do I even say to that?
You don't have to say anything. Just eat it warm, if you can. And remember, your name's still yours, even out there.
He walked toward the gate, the plate held the way a man holds something he's decided not to drop. Behind him, the guard at Gate 4 logged his badge number and waved him through without ceremony. That was how the gate treated everyone that morning. Present tense 1 minute, past tense the next. This was the 1100 and something th plate Byron had made, though he'd stopped keeping the true count around year 6. He wasn't a cook. He washed the trays, scraped the grease traps, and hauled the bleach buckets. He did it every morning at 4 before the first shift clocked in. Layoff notices went up on the board often lately. Every time one did, he stayed 2 hours past his shift, unpaid. He wrapped plates in the walk-in cooler where nobody would ask him to stop. "I saved you a plate," he said to the next one, and the next, and the one after that. "You remembered my name," a woman near the end of the line said. She stared at the tape as if it might vanish. "I remember everyone's name," Byron said. "That's the whole job. I thought your job was dishes." "That's the other job," Byron said. The woman almost laughed, about as close to a good moment as either of them would get that day. By the time the line had thinned to nothing, the cafeteria had gone quiet. The only sound left was the hum of the walk-in. Byron's own knees complained as he stood up from the folding table. Every plate had a name on it, so nobody walked out that gate a stranger. That was the whole of it. That was the only rule Byron Duckworth had ever needed. He did not know that a man named Sidney Kilbride had been standing at the far end of the cafeteria. Kilbride had been watching him for the last 4 minutes. It was an expression Byron would later learn to recognize as something closer to grief than disapproval. "Lock up when you're done?" a voice called from the kitchen doorway. "Always do," Byron said. Perronsburg was the kind of town that existed because of one thing, and the one thing was Tallbridge Steelworks. For 60 years, the plant's whistle had told half the county when to wake and when to eat. It told them when to go home, too. For most of those years, it had run 3 shifts without slowing. The founders had built the original furnace building with a bell tower on top, an odd flourish for a factory. The man who financed it wanted something more dignified than a siren. He wanted the town to hear it when the shifts changed. The bell was long gone, replaced decades ago by an electric horn. The tower still stood, empty and unused. It was a monument to an idea about work the plant itself had mostly stopped believing in. "Bell's still up there," Byron told a new hire once, nodding at the tower. "Nobody's rung it in 30 years. Didn't feel right tearing it down." That had changed too, in its own way. The orders had thinned. The machines had aged. Twice a year now, a new round of names went up on the corkboard by the time clock. Twice a year, Byron Duckworth went to the walk-in cooler. He carried a roll of foil and a fresh spool of masking tape. He had worked the Talbridge kitchen for 34 years, longer than most of the line workers had been alive. He had buried a wife. Her name he still could not say out loud without the whole kitchen going quiet around him. Everyone in the cafeteria knew not to ask about that. They only knew the plates and the ritual. They knew the man who never let anyone leave Gate 4 without being called by name one last time. "You ever think about retiring?" a coworker asked him once, watching him restock the tape. "Every day," Byron said. "Then I don't." Half the houses on his street belonged to families who had worked Talbridge in one generation or another. The elementary school had a mural of the plant's original furnace on its cafeteria wall. It had been painted the year the town incorporated. When the whistle used to blow at shift change, shopkeepers along Main Street would glance at their watches without thinking. It was like checking a clock they'd stopped noticing was even there. "Feels different lately," a long-time line cook told Byron one evening. She watched the parking lot empty faster than it used to. Used to be you could set your life by that whistle. Now half the town just waits to see whose name goes up next. It's still the same whistle, Byron said. Doesn't mean the same thing anymore, though, the woman said. Not when it's counting people out instead of counting shifts in. He only nodded and went back to stacking trays. Some truths didn't need agreeing with out loud to be true. Sidney Kilbride had been sent from the regional office. His job was to fix what he called structural inefficiency at 3 plants in the district. Tallbridge was the third. He was 56 years old, precise in his shirts, precise in his schedule. In break rooms he never entered. He was known quietly as a careful man. He could close a facility without ever raising his voice. He did not think of himself as cold. He thought of himself as merciful in the only way that mattered to him. Quick. He hasn't even toured the floor yet, an office assistant muttered to a coworker. And he's already cut the training budget. Give him a week, the coworker said. That's usually all it takes. 15 years earlier, when he'd first taken the regional post, Kilbride had issued a policy. The corporate handbook still called it, in a phrase he had personally chosen, dignified efficiency. No farewell parties, no collections for gift cards, no gathering at the gate. He had told his staff that then, and he still believed it now. Lingering over a layoff in his mind was its own kind of cruelty. A clean cut healed faster than a slow one. Kilbride watched Byron fold the last plate that morning. Something in his chest tightened, and he did not have a name for it yet. You're not authorized to distribute food outside cafeteria hours, Kilbride said when Byron finally noticed him. I've heard that every regional director says that eventually, Byron said, wiping his hands on his apron. I'm not every regional director. No, Byron said. You're not. Most of them at least pretend not to watch. I wasn't watching to catch you. So why were you watching? Kilbride didn't answer that. He looked at the folding table, the roll of tape, the empty foil box. Something crossed his face that Byron couldn't yet read. Have a good afternoon, Mr. Duckworth, he said, and left without another word. Neither of them said what they were both already thinking, that something between them had just quietly, invisibly begun. Later that afternoon, in the borrowed office Talbridge kept for visiting regional staff, Kilbride sat across from 2 junior analysts. They were reviewing the cost reduction plan for the district. The cafeteria's operating at a loss, one of them said. Outsourcing to a contractor saves the district about 11% on food service overhead. Do it, Kilbride said. The analyst hesitated. There's a sort of tradition tied to it. The man who runs it hands out plates to workers who get laid off. Some of the crew seem attached to it. Traditions aren't line items either, Kilbride said. Understood, the analyst said, and made a note. He did not tell them why the word tradition had made his hand tighten around his pen. He did not tell anyone that, and he had not told anyone in 33 years. The first time Byron made a foil plate, he had not been trying to start anything. He had been trying to survive a Tuesday. His wife had worked the line at a mill 2 counties over. It had a different name, but the same machinery. When it closed, she had been let go like most workers were let go back then. She was handed a cardboard box and walked past a security guard who wouldn't meet her eyes. She went home with a manila envelope. No one who had worked beside her for 22 years said goodbye. They didn't even shake my hand, she told him that first night. She sat at the kitchen table with the envelope still sealed in front of her. 22 years, and I got a box and a form letter. I'm sorry, Byron said. That's not right. That's not how a person should be let go. Doesn't matter how, she said. Gone is gone. It matters to me, he said. He reached across the table for her hand. She let him hold it, though she didn't hold back. She had gone quiet after that in a way that frightened him more than shouting would have. She took odd jobs she was overqualified for and underpaid at. She stopped going to the diner on Fridays. The regulars there, she said, looked at her like a cautionary tale. Slowly, over 3 winters, she became a kind of ghost in her own kitchen. She was present at the table, but somewhere else entirely. Byron had told himself it would pass. Grief for a job was like grief for anything, he thought. It would loosen its grip eventually. You still think about it, he said to her once, late, when neither of them could sleep. The way they let you go. I think about the box, she said. Not the job, the box. Like I was cleaning out a desk that was never mine to begin with. You worked there 22 years. It was yours. Didn't feel like it walking out, she said. Felt like I was returning something I'd borrowed. It hadn't passed, She had died of a heart attack in their garage on a Thursday night alone. Byron had been working a double shift at Talbridge that night. They needed the overtime pay more than they needed a Thursday together. He had come home at 11 to find the porch light on and the garage door still open. He had known, before he reached her, that he was already too late. "I should have been there," he told the empty garage once, months later, and no one answered him back. Nobody had called her name on her way out of that mill. Nobody had told her she mattered on the last day it would have counted. Byron had spent 3 months afterward doing nothing but working and sleeping. Then, on a February morning, layoff notices went up at Talbridge for the first time since he'd started there. He found himself standing in the walk-in cooler with a roll of foil in his hands before he understood why. He wrote a name on a piece of tape. He wrapped a plate. He carried it to the gate and put it into a stranger's hands. He said the only thing that felt true. "I saved you a plate." "Why?" the man had asked him, baffled, holding the foil like it might be a mistake. "Because somebody should have done this for someone I loved," Byron said, "and nobody did. So I'm doing it for you instead." It did not undo anything. It never would. But for one moment, that changed. A man about to become a number on a spreadsheet got to be a person with a name again. Byron had needed that more than he'd needed almost anything else in his life. He needed to be the one who gave it. A neighbor asked him about it once, in those early months. She watched him tape a name to a fresh square of foil at his own kitchen table before his shift. "You know, most of these men won't even thank you," the neighbor said. "Some of them will think it's strange. A stranger handing them supper like they're charity cases." "Let them think it's strange," Byron said. "My wife thought asking for help was strange, too. Strange is better than invisible. It won't bring her back." "I know that," Byron said. He kept writing the name, his hand steady, even though nothing else in him that week had been. "I'm not doing it for her anymore. I'm doing it so the next one doesn't end up like her. He never told the whole story to anyone at Talbridge. Most of the workers only knew him as the man with the plates, kind, stubborn, slightly strange. That suited him fine. Verna was 26, 6 months into the job. She tried hard not to let anyone see that her hands shook when she checked the layoff board each Friday. She had a 2-year-old at home and a landlord who did not care about hypotheticals. When her name didn't appear on the list that particular week, she stayed at the board anyway. She stood there a full minute longer than she needed to. She memorized the names that had made it and the ones that hadn't. It was math she didn't want to be doing. Byron noticed. Byron noticed everything at that corkboard. It was the only reason his plates ever found the right hands. "You've been standing there a while," Byron said, coming up beside her with a tray of clean cups. "Just reading," Verna said quickly, "making sure I know who's out." "You weren't reading names that weren't yours," Byron said. "You were reading your own 3 times to make sure it still wasn't there." Verna's mouth opened and nothing came out. "I'm not going to tell anyone," Byron said. "I just want you to know somebody saw it." He didn't say anything else that day. He waited until Verna went to her locker at the end of shift. When she opened it, she found a grocery bag tucked behind her jacket. Inside, bread, a dozen eggs, a sleeve of crackers shaped like animals. Byron had picked the crackers because they seemed like something a 2-year-old would like. Tucked in with the food was a folded index card. On it was a phone number for the county assistant's office. Below it, one line in the same square hand that marked every foil plate. "You don't have to ask." Somebody already noticed. Verna found Byron in the break room 20 minutes later, the grocery bag still in her hand. She couldn't get a full sentence out. "You don't owe me a thing," Byron said before Verna could finish stammering a thank you. "I don't understand why you do this," Verna said. "You barely know me." "I know what it's like to stand at that board and do math on your own future," Byron said. "I'm not doing this so you'll feel grateful. I'm doing it because nobody should have to ask twice to be seen." "How did you know I was scared?" "You stood at that board a minute longer than you needed to," Byron said. "I've stood there myself. I know what it looks like from the outside." Verna didn't say anything else. She hugged Byron instead, fast and a little too hard. It was the hug of someone afraid of crying in front of another person. Byron patted her back twice and told her to get home before the crackers went stale. Byron never mentioned it again. He had long ago stopped needing to be thanked for the things he did. He only needed them done. 3 weeks later, Verna caught him in the hallway outside the break room. She was steadier now, a little color back in her face. I got the assistants sorted, Verna said, and I picked up 2 extra shifts. We're okay for now. I'm glad, Byron said. I keep thinking about what you said, about not having to ask twice. I don't think about it too hard, Byron said, smiling. Just do it for somebody else someday. That's the only payment I take. I will, Verna said. I promise. 9 years and 2 states away stood a house with a driveway long enough to need its own name. Emlyn Redfern kept a cardboard box in its attic. His wife had learned over time never to ask about it. You'll tell me about that box eventually, she said once, only half joking. Eventually, Emlyn agreed. He had been 28 when Talbridge let him go. It was part of a round of cuts that had nothing to do with his work. It had everything to do with a spreadsheet in a regional office he'd never seen. He had walked toward Gate 4 that day, carrying nothing but the contents of his locker. He carried a fear so large it had a physical weight. His wife had given birth to their daughter, Lacey, 4 days earlier. He had exactly $11 in a checking account and no plan beyond the next 24 hours. A man he barely knew, the dishwasher. Somebody had called him once, though he'd never learned his actual job title. That man had stepped out from behind the cafeteria's service window with a plate wrapped in foil. His name was spelled correctly on a strip of masking tape across the top. He put it directly into Emlyn's hands. I saved you a plate, he'd said. I can't take this, Emlyn had told him. I've got nothing to give you back. I didn't ask for anything back. Everybody wants something back, Emlyn had said, more bitter than he'd meant to sound. I don't, Byron had said. Go home. Meet your daughter. Eat something warm tonight, even if it's this. He hadn't eaten it. He still didn't fully understand why. Some part of him had needed that plate more than he'd needed food that day. It was the one object in the world with his name on it, written in someone else's hand on purpose. He had carried it home wrapped exactly as he'd given it to him. The worst of that year came in November. He was 2 months behind on rent with a newborn who didn't sleep. A temp agency kept promising work that never came. He sat in his truck in a grocery store parking lot one night, doing arithmetic that never came out right. The plate was still on the passenger seat, where he'd left it that morning out of habit. We're not going to make it if something doesn't change soon, he told his wife on the phone. He stared at the foil in the dashboard light. Something will change, she said, though her voice didn't sound sure of it. I keep thinking about the man who gave me this plate, he said. He didn't know me. He just decided I mattered anyway. Maybe that's the part you're supposed to remember, his wife said. Not the money. That. He didn't answer her right away, but he drove home that night instead of sitting in the lot until the gas ran low. The next morning, he took the only interview that would return his calls. It was driving a lease delivery truck for a logistics outfit 2 counties over. He put the plate in a box before he left for that interview and never opened it again. 9 years later, Emlyn Redfern was 37, and the arithmetic had finally come out right, and then some. A logistics company he'd helped build from a single leased truck now held a controlling stake in a manufacturing group. That group owned 3 plants across 2 states. One of them, as of a filing he had not personally reviewed until that week, was Talbridge Steelworks. Lacey was 9 now, sharp-eyed and unbothered by things adults thought should bother her. It was Lacey who found the box on a rainy Saturday. She'd been looking for a Halloween costume that had been packed away wrong. "What's this?" she asked, holding up a foil-wrapped shape, gone slightly stiff and gray with age. A strip of masking tape was still legible across the top, Redfern, E. "Put that back," Emlyn said more sharply than he meant to. Lacey did not put it back. She turned the plate over in her hands, reading the name like it belonged to someone else. "Why would you keep a plate somebody made you and never even eat it?" "It's complicated." "It's not, though," Lacey said. "Either you were going to eat it, or you weren't." He didn't have an answer that fit in a sentence a 9-year-old would accept. So he told her the truth in the smallest pieces he could manage. A man, a bad year, a gate he'd walked out of with nothing, a plate with his name spelled right, when almost nothing else that month had gone right at all. "Is he still there?" Lacey asked. "I don't know. You should find out." "It's not that simple, Lacey." "Why would you throw away a plate somebody saved just for you?" Lacey said. It wasn't really the question she'd asked before. Emlyn understood, with the particular clarity 9-year-olds specialize in, that it was actually the only question that mattered. "I'm not throwing it away," he said quietly. "I've kept it 9 years." "Keeping it in a box isn't the same as remembering it," Lacey said. She went back to hunting for her costume, like she hadn't just taken the floor out from under him. He didn't answer her that night, but 2 days later, he finally opened an acquisition file he'd been putting off for a week. He found the words Tallbridge Steelworks, Perronsburg. There was a proposed cost reduction plan, too, authored by a regional director named Sidney Kilbride. Something in his chest went very still. "You're going to go, aren't you?" his wife said that evening. She'd watched him read the same paragraph 4 times. "I don't even know if he still works there." "That's not what I asked." "I have a company to run," he said. "I can't fly out over a hunch." "You've flown out over less than a hunch," his wife said. "You flew to a supplier meeting in another state because a shipment was 2 days late." "This is different." "It's exactly the same," she said. "Something's owed, and you're the only one who can pay it." He didn't argue with her. She was right. Lacey was still standing in the doorway listening, arms crossed, waiting for the answer she already knew was coming. The corkboard notice went up on a Tuesday. By Tuesday afternoon, Byron already knew it was worse than the usual round. The paper wasn't the standard layoff form. It was a memo, typed in Kilbride's clipped corporate phrasing, announcing that the cafeteria itself would close within 12 days. Its operations would be outsourced to a regional catering contractor, effective the start of next month. He read it twice before he understood the second paragraph. Buried under language about streamlined food service delivery, it meant his own job. He was still holding the memo when Kilbride walked through the cafeteria doors. 2 men from corporate he didn't recognize flanked him. Kilbride stopped at his folding table like a man stopping at a checkpoint. Not because he wanted to, but because the road ran through it. "I want to be direct with you," he said. "The gate ritual ends today, not at the end of the 12 days. Today." "You're closing the kitchen in 12 days, Byron said. "I think I can manage 12 more plates." "It's a liability," Kilbride said. His voice had risen enough that the handful of workers still on break turned to look. "Unauthorized food distribution. No health permits on the individual packaging. No oversight on what leaves this building in an employee's hands. I've let it go on far longer than I should have." He stopped himself before the word sentiment left his mouth, but everyone in the room heard it anyway. Out of consideration for morale. "It ends today." "You think you're protecting people?" Byron said quietly, so only he could hear it. "I've met men like you before. You think fast and clean is the same thing as kind." "And I've met people like you," Kilbride said. "You think a plate with a name on it fixes what a bad economy breaks." "It doesn't fix anything," Byron said. "I never said it did. It just means somebody was seen on their way out the door. That's not nothing, Mr. Kilbride. Some people never get even that much." Something crossed Kilbride's face then, gone almost before it arrived. For 1 second, Byron thought he might say something true. Instead, Kilbride turned to the room at large. "Effective immediately, no food leaves this cafeteria outside of scheduled meal service," he announced. "Any employee handing out packaged food at the gate will be considered in violation of company policy." "That's not right," one of the line cooks muttered, just loud enough to be heard. "It's policy," Kilbride said. "Right isn't the category we're operating in today." Nobody else spoke. Byron looked down at the roll of masking tape still sitting on his folding table. The name was half written on the last strip he'd started before the memo arrived. For the first time in 11 years, he did not finish it. That night, Kilbride's own supervisor called him from corporate. "District's asking why the Tallbridge closure is taking 12 days instead of 5, the voice on the phone said. "You're going soft on this one, Sidney." "I'm not going soft," Kilbride said. "I'm doing it clean. That's the whole point of the policy. Clean is fine. Slow isn't. Get it done." "It'll be done," Kilbride said and hung up before his voice could give away anything else. He sat alone in the borrowed office for a long time afterward, the phone still warm in his hand. On his desk was a folder he had carried for 15 years. He had never once opened it in front of another person. Inside was a single black and white photograph of his father in a Tallbridge uniform, taken the year before the cuts began. In it, his father was smiling in a way Kilbride barely remembered him smiling in person. He did not take it out that night. He only looked at the folder. It was the way a man looks at a door he has decided for the 100th time not to open. The next morning, 3 more names went up on the corkboard. Byron defied the memo in the only way he had left. He met each of them at their lockers instead of the gate. He pressed a folded paper napkin into their hands, a name written on it in the same square letters. Foil and tape had both been confiscated from the kitchen the day before. "It's not much," he told the last one, a young forklift operator barely out of his teens. "But your name's on it. That still counts for something." "It counts for a lot," he said. He folded the napkin carefully into his jacket pocket, like it was something worth keeping. 12 days became 11, then 9, then a handful. The cafeteria emptied out piece by piece. The walk-in cooler was cleared, the folding table stacked against a wall. The corkboard by the time clock was stripped down to bare cork. For the first time anyone could remember, Byron kept working. The paycheck mattered, and some stubborn part of him refused to leave before he had to. But the plates stopped, and something in the building's rhythm stopped with them. On the last day, Byron's own name was on the list. He had known it was coming once the outsourcing contract was signed. The whole kitchen staff had known. But knowing it was one thing, standing at Gate 4 with his own box of belongings in his arms was another. He walked the length of the fence line where he had stood for 11 years, handing plates to other people. For the first time, nobody was there to hand one to him. Verna caught up to him halfway across the lot, out of breath, having run from the loading dock. "They can't just let you go like this," Verna said. "Not you. Not after everything." "They can," Byron said. "They did." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Byron said. "For 11 years, I always knew what to do next. Wrap the plate. Write the name. I don't have a next thing anymore." "You gave me a bag of groceries and a phone number and told me somebody noticed," Verna said. "I'm telling you the same thing back. Somebody noticed you, too." "That's kind of you," Byron said, "but noticing isn't the same as fixing." "Maybe not," Verna said, "but it's what you always told me counted anyway." Byron couldn't answer that without his voice breaking. He just nodded and squeezed Verna's hand once, then walked on toward the fence alone. There was no folding table, no foil, no strip of masking tape with his name spelled right. Just the young guard at the gate, who nodded at him same as he nodded at everyone. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Duckworth," he said. "You too," Byron managed. "You're not going to say anything else?" he asked, half joking, used to Byron having a word for everyone. "Not today," Byron said. "I don't think I've got one." He got into his car and sat there for a long time before he turned the key. He let himself cry for the first time in 11 years. It wasn't for the job, though he would miss the job too. He cried for the shape of the thing he had built, grief, foil, and other people's names. It had just ended without ceremony. He thought about his wife, about the garage and the porch light. He thought about how nobody had called her name either, not on her way out of a building that no longer wanted her. He had spent 11 years making sure that never happened to anyone else on his watch. Now his watch was over. He had no plate, no name called, no one waiting at the gate for him. He drove home in silence and did not turn on the radio. He did not trust his own voice to hold if a song came on that meant something. Verna called him that night once her shift ended. "I heard about the meeting they're holding," she said. "Somebody big flying in." "I heard the same thing," Byron said. "Doesn't change much for me now. I'm already gone." "Maybe it should still matter to you anyway," Verna said. "You built the thing they're fighting over." The regional board meeting had been moved up by 6 days. Emlyn Redfern's office had requested a full review of the Talbridge closure plan. It was scheduled as a video conference linking 4 offices across 2 states. Kilbride had not fought the format. He assumed, correctly, that a screen made it easier to hold a room's attention on numbers instead of faces. Emlyn arrived at the Talbridge site in person instead. A foil-wrapped 9-year-old plate sat wrapped in a clean towel on the passenger seat beside him. Lacey rode beside it, hands folded. She had begged so persistently to come that her mother finally relented for 1 day of missed school. She seemed to understand, in whatever way a 9-year-old understands things, that something important was about to happen. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to," Emlyn told her in the car. "You can just sit and watch." "I know," Lacey said. "But if he's there, I'm going to say hi." "That's fine." "Is the man who closed the kitchen going to be mean?" "I don't know yet," Emlyn admitted. "Some people are only mean because nobody ever told them there was another way to be. That doesn't make it okay." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. But it might make it fixable. The connection glitched 40 seconds before Emlyn was scheduled to speak. The regional office's video feed froze mid-sentence, then dropped entirely. For nearly 3 full minutes, the room at Talbridge sat in silence around a black screen. Somewhere on a crackling phone line, an IT technician apologized and asked everyone to please stand by. Kilbride, at the head of the table, checked his watch twice. Byron had been asked to be present, though he still didn't fully understand by whom. He sat near the back of the room, hands folded in his lap. He was waiting for a decision that would happen with or without him. "Is it broken?" Lacey whispered. "Looks like it," Emlyn said. "Are you going to wait?" "No," he said and stood up. "I don't think I need a screen for this." Around the table, the local staff who had gathered for the meeting shifted in their seats. They seemed unsure what to do. Keep waiting on the technician's voice crackling through the speakerphone, or watch the man who had just stood up uninvited? Kilbride said nothing. He simply folded his hands and waited. It was a patience 15 years of meetings had trained into him. Nothing much surprised him anymore. This one would. When the feed reconnected, it came back mid-word. Emlyn was already on his feet at the front of the room. "I'll say it here, where people can hear it without a delay," he said. He set the towel wrap plate on the table. He unwrapped it slowly, slow enough that everyone understood he wanted them to see it. Foil gone brittle at the folds. A strip of masking tape, still legible after 9 years. Redfern, E. "9 years ago, I walked out of this building with nothing," Emlyn said. "No severance worth mentioning. A 4-day-old daughter at home and about $11 to my name. A man I'd barely spoken to before that day put this in my hands at the gate. He told me he'd saved me a plate. I never ate it. I couldn't tell you exactly why. It was the only thing that week that told me I still had a name." He looked directly at Kilbride. Every plate had a name on it, so nobody walked out that gate a stranger. "That's not a liability. That's the only thing this company has ever done that I've been unable to forget." "With respect," Kilbride said, though his voice had lost some of its usual precision, "sentiment isn't a line item. I have a facility to run within a budget I don't set." "I'm not asking you to run it on sentiment," Emlyn said. "I'm telling you, as the controlling shareholder of the company that now owns this budget, that the kitchen reopens. That's not a request. With all due respect to the sentiment in this room," one of the board members cut in, "reopening a loss-making service sets a precedent for every facility we own." "Set the precedent," Emlyn said. "I'll take that trade every time." "That's not how any of us were taught to run a company," the board member said. "It's time somebody taught you differently," Emlyn said. The board member, after a long pause, sat back and said nothing more. The room was silent long enough that the hum of the ceiling lights became audible. Kilbride's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might simply repeat the language from his memo. Liability, oversight, policy. The same words he'd used for 15 years whenever anyone questioned dignified efficiency. Instead, something in him gave way. "My father worked this floor," Kilbride said, and his voice had lost its clipped edge entirely. "Not laid off in a day, like your worker was, cut down slowly. A shift here, a shift there, over 11 months, each time with someone telling him it might turn around. I watched him disappear an hour at a time for almost a year. Then the company finally admitted what everyone already knew." "What happened to him?" Lacey asked, before anyone could stop her. Nobody in the room seemed to mind that a 9-year-old had asked the only question that mattered. "He stopped believing anyone would ever call him by name again," Kilbride said. "So I decided a long time ago that a fast cut was kinder than a slow one. I built an entire policy around not putting families through what mine went through." He looked at the plate on the table. "I never considered that the alternative to slow cruelty wasn't no ceremony at all. It was just being seen on the way out. I got that wrong." "Is that the man from the plate?" Lacey whispered to her father, standing now beside him, unable to stay in her chair any longer. "That's him," Emlyn said. Lacey walked straight to the back of the room before he could stop her. She stood in front of Byron, hands folded. It was just how her father had taught her to stand when meeting someone important. "You gave my dad a plate," Lacey said. "He kept it 9 years. I found it in a box." "Did he now?" Byron said, wiping his eyes and smiling despite himself. "He wouldn't even let me touch the tape at first," Lacey said. "But I taught him it wasn't a big deal to open it." "Sounds like you taught him a few things," Byron said. "I try," Lacey said, entirely serious. and Byron laughed for the first time in weeks. "You should tell him that," Lacey said to Kilbride, pointing back at Byron once she'd returned to her father's side. Kilbride turned. He hadn't looked at Byron since the meeting started. "I owe you more than a sentence," Kilbride said. "But I don't know how to say the rest of it in a room." "Don't say it," Byron told him. "Do it." Kilbride did not offer a quick apology and call it finished. Byron would not have accepted one, and everyone in the room, including Kilbride himself, seemed to understand that. "I'm not going to stand here and say sorry," Kilbride said to him directly. "That won't undo 15 years of a policy I wrote. I'll earn whatever trust is left to earn, or I won't get it. Either way, I owe you the work." "That's the first true thing you've said to me," Byron said. The work, as it turned out, was not simple. The finance system flagged the reinstated cafeteria budget for review 3 separate times over the following weeks. It was an old coding error in the plant's cost center, unrelated to the closure, but stubborn. It took Kilbride himself, not an assistant, to push it through. He sat on hold with corporate accounting for the better part of 2 afternoons. "It rejected again," Kilbride told Byron on the phone the second time, sounding more tired than angry. "Some flag from a system upgrade 3 years back. I could pass this to someone else." "Oh, but you're not going to," Byron said. It wasn't a question. "No," Kilbride said. "I'm not." He did not delegate it. He did not let it drop when it would have been easier to. He drove to Perronsburg twice that first month, without an entourage. He worked a full shift beside Byron in the reopened kitchen. He scraped the same grease traps Byron had scraped for 34 years. "You don't have to do this part," Byron told him, handing Kilbride a bucket of bleach water. "There's easier ways to apologize." "Not ones that mean anything," Kilbride said, and got down on his knees beside the grease trap without another word. They worked in near silence most of that first afternoon, and it was Byron, not Kilbride, who finally spoke. "My wife used to say the box they handed her felt like she was returning something she'd borrowed," Byron said. 22 years, and it still felt borrowed to her. "I think about that every time I write a name on a piece of tape." "I think about my father every time I sign anything with the word workforce in it," Kilbride said. "I didn't used to. I do now." "Good," Byron said. "You should." On his second visit, Kilbride brought a folding table of his own. It was an exact match to the one that had been stacked against the wall for months. He set it up himself by the service window without being asked. "I found the specs in an old maintenance order," he said, almost sheepish. "Figured you'd want the same one back." "You didn't have to do that," Byron said. "I know," Kilbride said. "That's why I did it." Byron looked at him a long moment, hearing his own words come back in Kilbride's voice. Something in his chest loosened just slightly further. He rewrote dignified efficiency from the ground up. This time it had a single new clause at its center. No employee leaves a Talbridge facility without being called by name. He sent the new policy to every regional office under his authority, not just Perronsburg. He made the calls himself, instead of routing them through an assistant. "This isn't optional," he told one plant manager 2 states over, who had pushed back on the added cost. "I don't care what it does to the food service line item. Every person who leaves gets called by name on their way out. Find a way." "That's going to run us a few thousand a year we didn't budget for," the manager said. "But we didn't budget correctly," Kilbride said. "Fix it on your end, not theirs." He hung up before the manager could argue further. He sat for a moment afterward, his hand still on the phone. He was surprised at how much less it cost him to say something he actually believed. His supervisor called again near the end of that second month, the same clipped voice from before. "District's asking about the Talbridge budget variance," the voice said. "Cafeteria's running well over projection again." "It's running exactly where it should," Kilbride said. "I signed off on it personally, and I'll sign off on it again next quarter." "That's not the answer I was expecting from you, Sydney." "It's the only one I've got now," Kilbride said. For the first time in the call, he didn't sound like he was bracing for an argument. "You can put that in writing if you'd like." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, the voice on the other end let out something close to a laugh. "I'll let it go for now. Don't make me regret it." Byron watched Kilbride work before he decided anything about forgiving him. When he finally did offer it, months later, it was not a single sentence but a slow unclenching. You don't have to forgive me on any schedule," Kilbride told him once, scrubbing a tray that didn't need it. "I know," Byron said. "I wasn't planning to. It loosened the same way grief once had, not all at once, and never completely. But it was enough to let something new grow in the space it left behind. The kitchen reopened on a Thursday in early spring, freshly painted. A new folding table stood permanently by the service window. A laminated sign above it read simply, "Every plate has a name." Byron ran it now with a title that had never existed before at Tallbridge, Kitchen Transition Coordinator. Behind it was a real budget, one that covered severance week meals and job placement flyers. On the days it was needed most, it covered one more thing too, a plate wrapped in foil with a name spelled correctly across the top. Kitchen Transition Coordinator. Verna read off the new sign, grinning. That's a mouthful for a man who washes dishes. A corporate insisted, Byron said. I told them the plate man would have done just fine. On the first morning, a new round of transitions came through, smaller this time and softer. They were handled just as Kilbride had promised they would be from now on. Lacey stood beside Byron at the folding table, a roll of masking tape in her hands. She practiced the block letters he had taught her that morning. She was careful not to let the letters slant. You have to press the corners down or it comes loose, Byron told her. Foil, not a lid. Lids sweat. Why not a lid? Lacey asked. Because a lid says I'm keeping this closed, Byron said. Foil says open it whenever you're ready. There's a difference. Lacey pressed the tape flat, smoothed it with her thumb like she'd been shown. She looked up at Byron with a particular kind of pride. It was the pride of someone who has just done something right for the first time. Did I get it right? She asked. You got it exactly right, Byron said. Verna came by on her lunch break to see the new sign, her toddler balanced on her hip. She stopped short at the sight of Lacey working the folding table like she'd been born to it. Who's this? Verna asked. This is Lacey, Byron said. She's learning the family business. Is it a family business? Lacey asked, delighted by the idea. It is now, Byron said. I still have the card you gave me, Verna told him, shifting the toddler to her other hip. You don't have to ask twice to be seen. I read it to him sometimes, even though he's 2 and has no idea what it means yet. He'll understand it eventually, Byron said. Most people do, once somebody finally shows them what it looks like. Look at her, Emlyn said quietly, watching his daughter work the tape. 9 years ago, I couldn't even open that plate. Now she's teaching other people's kids how to fold the foil. He still quoted Byron's line from the boardroom for years afterward. He used it at company gatherings and once, memorably, at a corporate retreat. There, a junior executive asked him a pointed question. Why did a logistics company bother funding a transition kitchen at a steel plant that barely broke even? Because some things don't show up on a balance sheet, Emlyn told him, and they matter anyway. Kilbride's rewritten policy spread further than Perronsburg. Within a year, 2 other plants in the district had folding tables of their own by their exit gates. They were run by whoever on staff was willing to learn. They picked up Byron's block lettering and his rule about foil instead of lids. None of them called it dignified efficiency anymore. The workers had started calling it simply the Gate 4 program, after the place it had begun. The corporate wanted a better name for the branding deck, a plant manager told Kilbride once, half laughing. I told them the workers already picked one, and it wasn't up for a vote. Good, Kilbride said. Leave it. The name stuck harder than anything corporate had ever managed to brand on purpose. Kilbride kept his father's photograph on his desk now, out of the folder at last. It was propped against a stapler, where he could see it every morning before he opened his email. He never explained it to anyone who asked. He only said it reminded him what efficiency was supposed to protect, not replace. Most people who saw it assumed it was sentimental clutter. The ones who knew the story understood it was closer to a promise. Who's that? A new hire asked once, nodding at the photograph. My father, Kilbride said. He worked this floor a long time ago. I keep him there, so I don't forget why any of this matters. Byron still worked 6 days a week. He still complained about his knees. But every morning now, before the first shift clocked in, he stood at the corkboard by the time clock. It had been restored, repainted, never bare again. He read every name pinned to it out loud once, quietly, the way some people say a blessing before a meal. Nobody walked out of Talbridge Steelworks a stranger anymore. That had always been the whole of it. That had always been the only rule Byron Duckworth had ever needed.